Hey guys, this is Jim, WT1W, and you're watching FEP Labs Radio. Thanks for stopping by, appreciate it. So, what we have today is the Juice Spot. This is a kit sold by my friend Thump, and I will put a link to his email address below. You can reach out to Thump and buy the kit directly from him. He also posts the parts required. He posts the parts required on his Thingiverse page. Now, Thump pre-printed these kits, so this is printed in ASA, and this is a very nice 3D print. I think it's ASA or ABS, one of the two. And he includes in his kits the whole entire package you would need, and these kits were about $20 a piece. So the kit comes with 3 sets of power pole connectors. It comes with the wires and the guts of the power pole connectors, and it comes with this little gem, which is a buck converter. And this is hardwired to go from 12 volts down to 5 volts for USB-A style power. And the whole thing goes together pretty slick. And we'll talk about a modification you can do to it as well. That goes in there like that. The power poles go in like so, there, and like so, there. And then the lid goes on like that. And then what you end up with when you do this is 12 volts in, 12 volts out, and 5 volts out through the buck converter's connection. Now, one modification you can do, and I'm going to go ahead and build this one as is. These are available on Amazon, and like I said, Thump has all these parts listed on his Thingiverse page. But these are D-Rock, D-R-O-K, buck converters. And this particular model is a single USB-A, like you can see. So that's 5 volts at, I think, 2 amps maybe. About 10 watts. Not a tremendous amount of power, but it would at least slow charge your phone. They also make these with a USB-C and A connector, designed to handle a little more power. Now, you're not going to charge your laptop off of this thing, I'm pretty sure. But you would have a USB-C connector to provide power for newer phones, for example, that don't need or have a USB-A cable that you're dealing with. And the beauty of this is it's an extension cord. It gives you a couple more 12-volt outlets for tuner or radio or whatever if you're using this thing. And then a convenient place to charge your cell phone. And the kit fits together pretty well. Most of it is just cutting these wires and jamming in power pole connections. And then after we have the power pole connections in, we've got to solder a couple wires to our buck converter for our input power. And that's all there is to it. Tio and Smokin' Ape have both done videos on this 3 years ago, something like that. Thump just recently announced he was selling a few of these as pre-done kits. So I grabbed a couple of them. So the kit comes with all the bits and bobs we will dump out on the mat. And what we have is a few lengths of wire and the screws to hold the case together. And then we have all the connectors for the power poles. So the first thing we have to do is pull all the power pole connectors back out of the box, and these just slide in place. No glue is required for this. And one other thing is, you could just glue the lid on after you're done, because there's no reason you're ever going to have to go back inside this thing. What we have is we're going to have 2 wires that come off of this, a positive and a negative. And that is our 12 volt supply into the buck converter. We also have our 12 volt supply coming in from this side, and that's going to feed the rest of everything else. So let's get at it. All right, so the one thing that Thump mentioned to me when I bought the kit was that as you have to put multiple wires in the power pole connectors, you need to plan out how you're going to do your wires. So what Thump suggests, and I think it's a great idea, and we're going to tear these apart. What we want to do is we're going to run one wire from our input to this power pole, this red one, for example. So one wire out of this red one into this red one, then into that red one. So there will be one wire out of this, but then there will be 2 wires in this, because there will be a jumper between these 2 red ones to provide power to both of the red connectors. And then back to our over to our buck converter, so that we don't have any power poles with more than 2 wires shoved in them. And this wire should be small enough to be able to do that fairly easily. The other thing that you're going to have to look at when you get ready to do this, if you decide to build this kit or buy it from Thump, whichever, is you're going to have to decide how long you need to cut your wires. And you will have to cut the wires because these are going to be way too long and we need that wire for other stuff. So by my calculations, it looks like the power pole connector goes in right about up to the dimple. So we need the wire, and the wire would be further up. That's the back side of the power pole connector, or the front side of the power pole connector, right at the front of that dimple. And the wire's back here, and that's the little latch thing. So we want to cut this wire so that we don't have a whole bunch of wire wadded up. So what I'm going to do is get started stripping some wire, and then we'll get one set done and then go from there. And we want to use just as little wire as possible on this. So the first set of poles I'm going to do is going to be these guys, and they're only going to have 1 wire in them. So what I want to do is get these stripped first and get them stripped to about the same length so we don't waste any wire, because then we're going to have to cut these. So that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is try and scientifically guesstimate my lengths of wire here. And this case is made that these will fit in here snugly. There's a little ledge that catches the groove in the side of the power poles. So from there, about like that, we want to go over here to our input power pole there. So we're going to cut it right there. And I might cut it a little long because I think we have more wire than we actually need. And then we want to strip that back just a hair. And let's do this one. Now I'm going to crimp these first ones, and then we'll probably solder the rest of them in. And these are 30 amp connectors. So now let's cut our black wire to about the same length. And do a little pull test on that, make sure that's good. And some of these you may be able to push in by hand. This wire is a little too weak to push in. To force this in by hand, you're going to need some mechanical assistance on the power pole connector. So now we want to take our 2 wires and twist them together and put on our power pole guts, and let's crimp it. And then we're going to do it again over here. I find that it's a lot easier sometimes to go ahead and put the connector in the crimp and then shove the wire in that way instead of trying to manipulate the loose wire into the crimper with the connector at the same time. And now that it's in there, I can hold it in place and we're good. And then that is our hot that we're going to solder to our buck converter. So now we need to do the same thing with the black wire. Oops, that's not solderproof. Should probably solder on something that's solder heat resistant. So now let's go back and finish this up and put some solder on this other connector. And now let's do our black connectors. And see, that seems to be on there pretty good, but we're going to whack it with a little bit of solder anyway. Alright, so now we need our next wire. So let's strip this guy back. Now, hopefully, I have got my wires cut to the right length, and I have not screwed this up. So I've got everything soldered up and in the power pole connectors. These leads might be a little short, so I might have to white trash it and put some jumpers on, and that's fine because it's all going to be sealed up in a box. So what I want to do is test fit this, and yeah, it's a little tight. There we go. It's a good pull test for your wires too if it passes that. So before we go any farther, let's get the meter and make sure that my power pole connections are solid and that I didn't dork that up. Alright, is there a short between hot and ground? No. If I plug in the hot here, do I have connectivity over here? I do. Let's test that one. I do. Other red. Good. Other black. So that is done. So this guy goes in here like so, and it's designed that that little notch between the USB connector and the rest of the circuit board is going to fit right in there like so. And this is our positive power lead up here, or is that negative? That's our positive, it looks like. Yep, that's our positive. And since this will only fit in this case one way, the way that's designed, for that little notch to hold it in. Thump designed these cases and they are a beautiful, beautiful fit. We can reach with our positive lead just perfectly, but our negative lead is not going to reach, so I need to solder on a little bit of a jumper. Okay, nobody will ever know unless you tell them. I'm not going to. So we should be able now to solder this on the board. I've got our box put together. I had one problem, and it's my fault, not Thump's. My hot wire is just sticking up a little skosh, and I would have to resolder it and push it down so my lid doesn't fit exactly flush. It's not like I'm going to be using this in the rain anyway. We had tested our throughput before, so now we have power going in, and let's plug in our USB tester and see if we got power. And we do. 5 volts. Now obviously I'm not running anything out of it, and if we check our power poles, which are coming from the same place, I'm sure we'll find that we have 12 volts power there. So let's fire up our meter, and yep, you can see that on the camera. And we got 13.2. I don't know how charged that battery is. Obviously it's not fully charged. That is the juice spot. I think I might have also heard this called the juice box. This is an interesting little gadget to have, a USB digital tester, and I'll put a link to this below. And that's it. So now you have a handy little 12 volt extension or extra thing to hook up, charge a phone, run a tuner, whatever, off of your battery or your main power supply. I don't know the exact power rating on this. I would probably not push this more than 10 or 12 amps tops, and I'd be very wary about 10 or 12 for a sustained time. Thump doesn't really give any specs on how long or how much power you can put through it, so be careful. Again, the link for this will be in the description below. Thump is reachable by email, and he sells this directly. It's not on Etsy or eBay or anything, and he has about 8 or 10 of these kits left, I believe. And I think I bought 2 kits from Thump, and I think my other kit, I'm going to redesign the case a little bit, and I'm going to put a USB-C in there. D-Rock also makes an A and C buck converter, So you could easily cut that out and use that in this case, or if I modify it, I'll just do my own, whichever. In any case, guys, that's all I've got for today. The Thump Juice Spot. The ghetto looking case is my fault. Guys, that's all I have for today. Thanks a lot. 73.